Well, I should pony up and entertain me. I got teeth. The citric acid cycle.
Look here.
What's wrong with you?
That's so cute.
Anybody else?
I can draw.
The citric acid cycle. You gotta know all those steps. And it ties into the electron transport chain. And as I told you, the electron transport chain is where you have the oxygen used. There's nothing in that citric acid cycle that uses oxygen. It's an oxidative process that generates NADH and FADH2. The only reason why we need oxygen is at the end of the electron transport chain to take electrons away from the NADH and the FADH2. If you don't reoxidize those molecules to make NAD plus and FAD, how can you keep oxidation going, right? That's why you need oxygen. And then ultimately, we tie the electron movement in that chain to proton movement, which makes oxidative phosphorylation work. Now remember, we define metabolism as being both catabolism, which is effectively oxidation, and anabolism, which is reduction, okay? Catabolism is breakdown of molecules to make energy. Anabolism is adding electrons to molecules to store energy. The citric acid cycle is defined as amphibolic, meaning it is involved in both processes. It's not only involved in breakdown of molecules to make energy, it's there to supply skeletons for building molecules, specifically amino acids and fats and other things like that. Now look at this process. Notice pyruvate goes in and it gets oxidized by 4 NAD plus and 1 FAD. And you've got to realize that every NADH that we have here represents the possibility of generating 2.5 ATP. So right there, that one pyruvate can generate 10 ATP from NADH, and every FAD going to FADH2 represents 1.5 ATP. So one pyruvate going through this cycle is going to make 11.5 ATP from electrons and an additional ATP in the form of that GTP. So notice one pyruvate going through this cycle is going to give you 12.5 ATP. I told you that glycolysis going to 2 pyruvate only gets you 2 ATP. This happens twice for every glucose. So you can see you're going to get 25 ATP just out of this process. And then, of course, 25, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's
So let's see.
I can't see.
1, 2, 3, 4, NAD plus NADH, which is going to give you 10 ATP, plus 1.5. What am I doing wrong here? It's 12.5, right? Times 2, which is 25. Well, how do I get 30 ATP? Oh, that's right. I forgot that. All right. Never mind. Just ignore the funny man up front, okay? So notice this is an oxidative process. Oxidizing agents are NAD plus and FAD, and you must have oxygen around to keep these as FAD and NAD plus. Now, I ask you, where's the only real energy in this process that you see? What molecule in this process that's being made represents real energy? GTP, absolutely. All these other things are like you getting a check from somebody. Has anybody ever gotten a check in this day and age, or is that just so old school? You got a check. Is that real money? Nah, it's not real money. That's the promise of money, isn't it? Right? That's saying, I will pay you this if you go to the bank and you cash in that check, and the bank will give you money, which is what you really want, right? This is like real money. This is somebody paying you cash. This stuff, NADH, FADH2, is like somebody paying you a check that you have to go cash in to get that money from. What is the bank we're talking about? You're cashing these electrons in at the electron transport chain. And the electron transport chain takes those electrons and uses those electrons to drive ATP formation. Now notice, I see 1, 2, 3. It's not shown up there, but there's a carbon dioxide loss at pyruvate dehydrogenase. So 1, 2, 3 carbon dioxides that are lost from that 3-carbon pyruvate molecule. That means to you that we fully oxidize the pyruvate to electrons and carbon dioxide. Once again, we breathe in oxygen in order to keep these redox molecules in the oxidized form. We breathe out carbon dioxide, which is released from the breakdown of these organic molecules. So here we have pyruvate dehydrogenase. That pyruvate gets combined with coenzyme A. That is an oxidative process. The oxidizing agent here is NAD+ to make NADH. Understand that NADH, as I said, represents the promise of energy. You can cache those electrons in at the electron transport chain, and that will drive the formation of 2.5 ATP. Just this step alone has already made more energy than what you would get out of breaking glucose down to 2-pyruvate in anaerobic glycolysis, which gives you 2 ATP. This gives you the equivalent of 2.5 ATP. So notice this is the first step in which carbon dioxide is lost. We have irreversibly lost that carbon dioxide, and we make this molecule acetyl-CoA, which is perfectly fine. That's the way you should draw it on a test. Notice this molecule has a high energy bond called a thioester bond. That is an activated molecule. Why do we do that? Why bother? Why not just combine that pyruvate with oxaloacetate to make citrate? Because this process of taking and adding 2 carbons onto the oxaloacetate is an endergonic process. It's something that requires energy. So if you just had pyruvate floating around and it wanted to donate that 2-carbon group to the oxaloacetate, it would require energy to do so. Well, where does the energy for this condensation reaction come from? Breaking that thioester bond that we just set up with pyruvate dehydrogenase. It doesn't exist very long, but it exists long enough to condense this 2-carbon unit onto oxaloacetate to make this molecule citrate. The enzyme responsible for this is citrate synthase. And citrate synthase is allosterically regulated. And you better be able to tell me on a test how it's allosterically regulated. It's inhibited by NADH, it's inhibited by ATP, and it's inhibited by succinyl-CoA. Let's go through these 3 things, because it's critical for you to be able to tell me. On a test, I will ask you to draw a step and tell me whether that step is allosterically regulated or not. If it is allosterically regulated, you're going to need to tell me how. That does not mean that I'm only going to give you allosterically regulated steps, okay? It just means that you better know how these are all controlled. And once again, this is a valve to control flow through this pathway. Now, can you imagine? I'm not breathing, I'm not exercising. By the way, those of you who want to get your extra credit by exercising, you got to do it by a week from today, okay? Midnight next Monday is the deadline for that lactate production picture, okay? So you're out exercising. You took the hard way. Instead of being embarrassed in public coming in costume on the day before Halloween, so Halloween Eve, you go and you go to the gym and you work out, put yourself in a pain and misery to where your muscles start to cramp up because they've been deprived of oxygen, and then you get sweaty and you take that picture and you curse my name and I get a little giggle out of it and give you 5 points. What have you done to yourself? You have deprived yourself of oxygen to the point where you no longer can reoxidize NADH back to NAD+. You now are signaling to yourself that you should not be going through aerobic respiration anymore. You need to switch to anaerobic glycolysis. Can you see how building this molecule up is a way for the citric acid cycle to measure whether there is oxygen around? Because if there's not oxygen, you will not be able to restore NAD+, NADH will build up, and it will say to this enzyme, wait a second, we don't want the citric acid cycle working. We need to send the pyruvate to lactate production, not into the citric acid cycle, because we have no way to oxidize it. That's an excellent test question. Why would ATP shut this down? Well, I told you that the citric acid cycle is in part responsible for catabolism to make energy. It's that same old theme again. If I have a lot of ATP around, I don't want to make more. So this is going to feed back and shut it down. And then succinyl-CoA, what is that? That is a step that comes further down this pathway. Succinyl-CoA, if it starts to build up, it's going to signal way back to the beginning of the cycle, and it's going to say, hey, steps after you are not working. Stop giving me more. Okay? It's not working. Send the carbon somewhere else. All right, I am done. I will see you on Wednesday. Go study for your quiz. And enjoy